Gettysburg Museum of History Studios. You're listening to Addressing Gettysburg.
Hello, everybody, and welcome to another episode of Addressing Gettysburg. This episode is going to be on a rather unique topic. It is an Ask a Guide, but it's going to be on baseball in the American Civil War. My name is Michael Barycki, and if you cannot tell, the usual host of Addressing Gettysburg, Matt Callery, is not in this seat. Since today's topic is about sport, and Matt has absolutely zero athletic ability or knowledge of sport in general, we have relegated or banished
killed
Matt to the producer's room. So now, producer Matt, how are you, buddy?
Hi, Mikey. How are you?
Oh, I'm just fantastic. You sound much better back there.
Listen, I kind of like it back here a little better, honestly, because all the bullshit's on you now. You've got to carry the show.
Oh, it's so hard to do.
Well, we'll see.
All right,
see what happens.
Luckily, we have two fantastic guests with us today. Leading off, center field is going to be Gettysburg License Battlefield Guide and recurring guest of the show, Lewis Trott. Lewis, how are you?
I'm fine. I don't think I'm fast enough to play center field, though.
Oh,
Maybe
okay.
put me first base.
Mickey Mantle wasn't very fast, but he still managed to do it.
Yeah, for a while until his knees gave out and the alcohol got to him.
Then we'll put you on first base.
There we
also,
go.
listen, I've been on some of your tours. I've seen videos of your tours, and I've also been in here when you've been on the show with Matt. I think Matt holds you back a bit. I think he drags you down. So I want to see you express yourself today. Spread your wings.
I can't tell you how long I've been waiting for somebody to tell me this. I am so excited.
Well,
so excited.
Like we said, Coke Zero today, calorie free.
Calorie free.
All right, and we're happy about it.
He's about to go on a full trot.
A full Trot Nixon. And our other guest is my friend, my Facebook friend, Jeff Pasnik. Jeff, welcome to the show.
Thank you. It's glad to be here.
Awesome. So what I'd like to do today, since we're talking about baseball and the Civil War.
No, hold on. How is Jeff on the show, Mikey?
Well, because he's sitting here. Jeff is a longtime patron. And Jeff, how did you end up on the show?
So when being a patron, David sent out an email that they were looking for suggestions for shows. I myself am interested in vintage baseball and how baseball came about, especially during the Civil War. I actually am a vintage baseball player back home, and I figured, you know what, I'll throw out the idea. I'm not an expert. I'm more of an enthusiast, and once Dave said that was picked, I kind of sent him an email and said, hey, I'd love to be able to sit in. I thought we'd be hanging out in the back, but I'm glad to be sitting here and helping out with the discussion.
Even better, on the air. Lewis, since we're on the topic, your love of baseball, where does it come from?
I remember it. As most folks know, I'm old. But in 1972, my grandfather took me to my first games at Memorial Stadium to see the Baltimore Orioles. I still have, it was 2 games that year, Detroit and Boston. I still have the programs for those games. And I vividly remember one of the games because I went down to the dugout before the game started and got a bunch of autographs on that program. And I still have those programs today. And Rich Snyder's maybe listening. He will listen to this. Me and him talk about baseball a lot. He's become a very good friend of mine through this show, and I appreciate him. He was friends with a fellow named Elrod Hendricks, who was the former catcher for the Orioles. I have his autograph on that program, but I also have this guy named Doyle Alexander. And while a lot of listeners might not recognize names from the 70s, they will recognize his name later on because he was traded from the Atlanta Braves to the Detroit Tigers for John Smoltz. So I have his. He played for the Orioles back then. I have his, but it was my granddad who took me to games at Memorial Stadium. I used to listen to the ball games on the radio. Chuck Thompson was the Baltimore radio announcer, and it was just great. I'm not saying baseball was better back in the 70s, but I enjoyed it better in this. The uniforms were definitely better in the 70s, but I just enjoyed the game back then, and I've loved baseball ever since. So.
And it is interesting because obviously we all love the Civil War. We're here.
Yep.
And baseball in its own unique way ties into that. For me, I grew up on baseball. My father was a minor league umpire who went to the Harry Wendelstedt School of Umpiring in 1980.
I know the name, yeah.
Yep. So when I was young, he was down south umpiring games. So I grew up on a lot of those stories. We had season tickets at Veterans Stadium for the Phillies on the first base side, section 310. And there is that connection between baseball and our history and the American Civil War, and we're going to tie those things together today with our discussion.
I would like to pause real quick how I got here, because Jeff's the one that throws out the topic. And like I told y'all before we started, one day I get this random email from Dave. It's like, hey, do you like baseball? And I reply, yeah, the Orioles stink. I wish they were better this year. And I'm thinking he wants to talk about the Orioles for some reason. And he says, oh, we want to do this, this podcast. I said, yeah, I'm all in. It's right up my alley and he didn't know that. Matt didn't know that. Before I got into the Civil War, I was a member of the Society of American Baseball Research. And that's where the term sabermetrics comes from. All these advanced analytics, it started with saber. I wasn't in it for the math because math is overrated. Cool kids hang out in the history class. That's us. But I was in it for the history, and I'd get 2 publications. I think it was once a quarter, the Baseball Journal and the National Pastime. And they have analytical stuff in their stats, but it's also a bunch of history. Mm-hmm. And I was really into that. And so I had this little tidbit for Matt no reason for me to tell him this prior to this because it doesn't deal with Gettysburg or any of that. But Matt's had Jim Hessler on here. He's had Ron Kirkwood on here. He's had a number of Scott Hartwig on here. A number of people, historians who've written some great books. But I've been on quite a few Ask a Guides, and Matt didn't know that. But I too am a published author, and I have an essay that was published back in 2006, I believe, 2006, and this is the Fenway Project. And each year, SABR, Society of American Baseball Research, would get together for a sort of a convention thing, and they do it at different ballparks. So in the early 2000s, they went to Fenway Park. I was living down in Fayetteville, North Carolina, because I was down at Fort Bragg, and I couldn't go. I didn't have no money. My money primarily went to beer, which is really important. And so I didn't have money to go. But they invited people to send in essays, not only if you had attended, but if you were at home, because you could watch the games on TV. And so I sent in an essay. Let me find out what page it was on. I'm not going to go through the essay or anything. I just want to prove that 119.
While you're looking there, I have a question for you. Mm-hmm. How come you never told us before that you...
Because it just didn't have anything to do with this.
Well, to be fair, like I said earlier, we're going to give you some opportunity today to spread your wings.
Yeah.
Matt, because you hold him
My
back.
wings felt clipped before.
You never cared to ask if he had anything published. Jesus.
Usually, that's the first thing people tell you, but Lewis is a little more modest than
But I wrote an essay, and I remember doing this. There was a 3-game series at Fenway between the Atlanta Braves and the Boston Red Sox. When I go to baseball games, I'm not very fun because I don't talk to people. I keep score. I filled up more than one scorebook that I still have at home. And for a while there, I was even keeping score at home. And I just did it because it's fun. It keeps you engaged in the game. And I like to look back at the preceding innings to see what happened when a particular batter comes up, and I don't have to wait on the announcer to tell me. So I wrote an essay on keeping score at a baseball game. I did it from home, and I showed in the essay that, when you walk a player early in the game, they say, and the team doesn't score a run off of that walk, they say, well, they survived that and it doesn't matter. It does matter because it changed the makeup of the lineup coming to the plate in later innings. And in the game I wrote the essay about, that's exactly what happened. I remember Gary Sheffield was playing in that game, and he wouldn't have been up at a particular crucial moment in the later innings but for some walks earlier in the game. So that was what the essay was about. But I was a member of Society of American Baseball Research for a number of years for the history. So when Dave sent out this email, it's like, yeah, I'm all in. It was just strange. And then I happened to have this Civil War baseball shirt that I got decades ago that's 3 times too big for me, and I had given it to my kids to wear as a nightshirt. So I said, hey, give me the shirt back so I can wash it and wear it on the podcast. So I just got this from my daughters. I'm going to give it back to them. They can use it for the nightshirt again. But that's how I come to be sitting here.
All right. Well, let's start to tie baseball into our favorite topic, the American Civil War. I'm going to read an article here from April 30th, 1863, from the Trenton State Gazette in the great state of New Jersey. A match game of baseball occurred between selected nines of the 5th and 8th New Jersey regiments on Tuesday last, resulting in favor of the 8th by a score of 50-15. The players from the 8th were Hopwood, Hopper, Westervelt, Loopy, Reisler, Hardy, Day, Quigley, and Sugard. From the 5th, Smith, Bowie, Shibit, Einberger, Dugan, Wickford, King, McIver, and Thomas.
Wow, what a bunch of names those are.
On the second innings, the 8th Regiment made 14 runs. When I first came across this article a few years ago, it took me aback a bit because to me, it's a very revealing, very simple, but it's very revealing. Number one, here's something being reported in a newspaper back home that people are paying to read. So the readers in this newspaper know what they're reading. Now, there's no context about what baseball is. They're reading a box score in the middle of a war, number one. Number two, they're playing these organized games. This isn't like a little scrimmage. This is a game with selected nines, probably the best 9 players on the team that the regiment are picking. So you figure there's a pool of guys that are playing or very familiar with the game, and they're playing organized games. They're playing here. The 8th New Jersey is playing the 5th New Jersey, and April 30th, where's the Army on April 30th? They're about to fight the Battle of Chancellorsville. And these two regiments will be fighting and dying next to each other on the Plank Road just a few days after that. But it also made me ask a lot of questions about the baseball in the Civil War. How important was it? How widespread was it? Is this a unique incident? Did lots of regiments have teams? Did they play each other? So those are the kind of things I'd really like to explore today. So if we could, Louis, start us off with how does baseball get into the Civil War?
Well, baseball is being played in the United States decades before the Civil War, and there's no one inventor of baseball. It springs out of different games, rounders that comes from England, some characteristics of cricket maybe, and this other game called town ball that communities played. And so it's being played before the Civil War. I think it's 1845 that the first big team, correct me if I'm wrong, Jeff, New York Knickerbockers, not the basketball team, but they're the first big organized team up in New York. And New York was the center of baseball. They had the most teams. They were the most organized. They formed, years later, they formed the first big association called the National Association. It revolves around these New York teams. Brooklyn, which was a separate entity, and then New York being the city area. So Brooklyn was separated out at that point. And so they're playing this game, and it evolves over time, different rules, and Massachusetts picks it up at a certain point before the war. They have a different set of rules. There's the New York rules and the Massachusetts rules. New York has evolved the game from town ball, which featured a square field, and it had different bases around the points of the square, and then another one outside of that is acting as home plate. And the rules are fluid. Sometimes you don't have foul territory, so you could hit the ball behind the catcher if you can. So sometimes teams would have 2 catchers, and there's not a prescribed number of players. Today we have 9 in the field at any given time. Back then you could have 20. And you need 20 if you're going to hit it in any direction. So rules are very fluid. You can get outs by letting the ball bounce once and then catch it because nobody's playing with gloves. Gloves don't come about until after the Civil War. The Massachusetts game features a method of retiring a batter by throwing the ball at him, which is fun if you're not the guy that's being plunked with the ball. So the ball was softer in those instances. So you've got all these different rules, but these different leagues are springing up, primarily New York, though. And so and I must say, a lot of the players are middle class and up because New York Knickerbockers and these other New York Excelsior Club, which was a top-notch club when they come about, they require players to pay dues and pay for their uniform.
It's like your modern day golf clubs are having.
Pay for this and that. If you're struggling to make a living and living paycheck to paycheck, like we say today, you don't have that kind of money. If you're a farmer, you don't have the time neither. So you've got to have not only the money, but the time to engage in the sport, any sport. And so you're having upper middle class to upper class play these games. And then naturally, when the war breaks out, some of these men are going to join in the war effort, and that's when it's going to spread the game. You have accounts of Union soldiers being in Southern prison camps, and they're playing baseball. Southerners seeing this, and what's that? New Orleans has its own little baseball hub at the time as well, even though it's down south, but it's right there on the Mississippi River, so they got influences from the outside. So that springs up down there in a little different manner, I think, rather than just being spread by POWs and such. But it spreads during the war because these guys played it before the war. They entered the war in these various regiments, and they're taking the game with them as a form of recreation. And commanders appreciate that, because if you're not playing baseball and you're not drilling, what are you doing? You're sitting around thinking about home, or you're thinking, how can I get out of here? Or who's got the alcohol? None of those things are good for you. But if you're playing ball, it's occupying your mind, and you're sort of, one of the benefits early on, even before the war, that proponents of the game say, it helps make you fit. It's
correct.
Good exercise.
I'm going to point that out.
Yeah, it's good exercise.
One of the reasons it was populated in a lot of larger cities, New York, Boston, it was a way for that middle and upper class to go out and receive exercise, get fresh air in their lungs. Is a comment you'll read if you do research, that they go out and get fresh air in their lungs. And it was designed to be a gentleman's game. It was not competitive at the get-go. It was designed for the batter, which was referred to as the striker. He could refer to the hurler or the pitcher. Would you please desire to hit the ball here? Pitch the ball to me here. The most useless position on the field prior to the Civil War, before it became professional, was the hurler. It was that's where you put the guy that you weren't really like. Just put him out there, the guy with the least amount of skill.
It's the delivery guy for your pizza. He doesn't make it.
Correct.
But he brings it to you. Exactly. And you eat it.
Exactly.
His task is not to get the batter out. His task is to get the ball there so the batter can hit it.
Yes.
Now, we alluded to some of the differences in rules back then. So once we get into the Civil War and the game evolves to what these guys are playing in camp, Jeff, since you play that style of baseball, what are the main differences that modern day baseball people would notice right away?
There's a few things you would notice right away, depending on if you're playing variations of rules. So the thing with baseball is, even if you're a purist at heart, even modern day, there's that huge debate over the designated hitter, right? The game has evolved. There are changes every year. The New York Knickerbockers were the first team in 1845 to write down a set of rules. I mean, they were very basic, how far the bases are apart and things of that nature. But as the game evolved, a few things that you could see was, again, the hurler had to deliver the ball in a pendulum motion. So you could not throw the ball overhand if you were the hurler. It had to be like a softball pitch underhand. If you caught the ball prior to 1863 in fair territory or foul territory on one hop, it was an out. Three outs were, aside. The other one that people notice is balls and strikes were never counted originally. So you had one umpire. He was usually chosen between the two teams. So usually a player that's not available or just someone walking around. And he would be umpire of the game. He would stand next to the catcher, and you would get 4 or 5 pitches. And then depending on if the batter was not hitting him or the pitcher was not delivering them, then the umpire would warn the batter or the pitcher to deliver or swing at hittable pitches. All runners advance on a walk. There are 3 balls equal a walk, not 4, like there's in a modern game. And probably the hardest one for anyone who tries to play a vintage style game now is you cannot overrun first base. You have to drop anchor, and you can't just turn to the right and be safe. That is one of the big things that is the difference.
Now, Lewis, we alluded to this a few minutes ago, but Abner Doubleday wrote all these rules, right? The general.
Not only did he do that, he grew a baseball in his backyard, and he came out of the ground, and he said, "Man, look at this. What could I do with this?" And then he took a tree limb and swung at it.
Wow.
What a game this could be. But no, he didn't.
Yeah.
So the story is, and correct me if I'm wrong, Jeff, the story is, we do know this for a fact. Abner Doubleday goes to West Point in 1838. He's a cadet at West Point. Early 20th century, early 1900s, a fellow named Albert Spalding. I think it's Albert G. Spalding. Mm-hmm. And if you're not into sports at all, you may have still heard of Spalding Sporting Goods. It's still around.
Balls,
That's
gloves.
the guy, Spalding.
I've heard of that.
Spalding.
Oh,
Aware of Spalding.
Matt's still here. That's
I had
good.
a
Thank you, Matt.
Spalding baseball mitt and basketball. Thank you.
There you go. Yeah.
Thank you.
So he goes over to Europe, and this is very, just touching on the highlights. Somebody's talking about baseball being coming from rounders, the English game of rounders, which comes to America with the English, and they're playing it. And Spalding doesn't like this. Oh, no. Baseball is a truly American game. We invented it. Has nothing to do with this rounders mess. And so he's going to go home and try to figure this out and prove it. Somewhere along the line, this fellow out west named Albert Graves writes him a letter. Abner Graves.
Abner.
Yeah, we got two Abners. Abner Graves writes him a letter and says, "I knew Abner Doubleday, and he invented baseball." He says other things, but that's the point of his letter. Abner Doubleday invented baseball. He was a little kid when Doubleday was a grown man in West Point. But anyways.
And claimed to have witnessed Abner invent the game.
He's still there.
In the town of Cooperstown.
Cooperstown, named after James Fenimore Cooper, who has nothing to do with baseball. So he writes this letter. Spalding runs with it and says, here's my proof. We got this guy out in California or wherever saying this is what happened. And that's how that springs up. The problem is he says he witnesses Doubleday doing this in 1839 in Cooperstown. Cadets at West Point aren't allowed leave in their first to second year. Second year, you got to be, I think it's third to fourth year, you get your first leave, and that worked out well for AP Hill. Trying to keep at Gettysburg, too, somehow. But so Doubleday was still at West Point in 1839. Abner Graves never saw this happen, but Spalding took it for what it was worth. That creates baseball as a national American unique invention, and that's the end of the story, and that's what they went. Cooperstown has run with it ever since. They, we talked previous, they have the ball field there, Doubleday Field, where they play the game at. There's plaques, and I've been there once to see Cal Ripken go in the Hall of Fame. There's plaques on buildings that say Doubleday has invented it. What's interesting is Civil War soldiers back then, not all, Meade's not one of these guys, but they like to self-promote. Me and Meade are alike. I didn't tell you I was a published author. Meade wouldn't have done that either. And Meade never writes his memoirs, but they like to say what they've done. Chamberlain did a lot on Little Round Top. He's the first one to tell you. If Doubleday had invented baseball, I'm sure Doubleday would have said, "Hey, look what I did." But he doesn't do that. He never says he invents baseball.
And none of the players ever refer to it as Doubleday's game, I'm sure, either.
No.
What's crazy to me is, like you said, you've been there relatively recently in the grand history of time to Cooperstown, and there's still, mentioning that.
They embrace it.
We've known for decades. I mean, there's members in the Baseball Hall of Fame. The Wright brothers are some of the earliest members into the Baseball Hall of Fame from the 1870s and 80s. They were cricketers. I mean, in this article, right here it says, between selected nines, it says, on the second innings, the 8th Regiment made 14 runs. That's the British still use innings for first or second, even in the singular. So they all come from the same thing. They all come from rounders and cricket kind of combining. And it's just crazy that they would still. All right.
But it fit a narrative, right? It having Abner Doubleday be the the poster child of who invented baseball, a true American hero, the hero of Gettysburg.
Cited the first cannon at Fort Sumter to reply to the Confederates. Yeah. You can't get any more American than that.
So it fit Spalding's desire to prove that this was an American game. Abner Doubleday had already passed on, so it was.
There were.
We gotta. Here's somebody that said it. Move on.
Perfect.
But let me go back to Graves, because we got a side note to Abner Graves. I think it's 1924 to 25, somewhere in there. Don't quote me on the date. He was married, and he gets a little delusional. He thinks his wife is trying to poison him. So to get out ahead of that, he kills his wife. And what does he do?
It's wise.
He pleads temporary insanity. Who else does that?
The old Sickles playbook.
Yeah, yeah.
Smart man.
We can bring Sickles into any podcast too here at Addressing Gettysburg. We can do that too. We can play that game. But that, my point is not to make fun of Sickles or anything. I don't know when it developed, but clearly he had some mental problem. Graves did. So maybe this whole I saw Abner Doubleday do this is part of this mental issue he had later on in life. We don't know.
Right.
But he clearly didn't see Doubleday invent anything. So.
All right, so let's talk about Doubleday's game in the Army. Jeff, if you don't mind, how are they organizing these? Do these regiments actually have teams? Or how are they organizing games against one another? Or is it kind of a pick up and play when you can kind of situation?
So again, you're going back to you're pulling these soldiers right out of their hometown. So the back then, the 19th century, you had clubs. Most towns had versions of baseball being played. We refer to it as baseball. They could refer to it as town ball, rounders. So now you're taking them, you're putting them into the regiments. And as early on, they would just pick up. And it's just as if we're all kids again. What do you do when you're a kid? You just go around the neighborhood. Hey, you're about my age. Go grab your ball and go grab your mitt. Let's go play some baseball. So a lot of them would end up going into units. The regiments, when they're downtime, would end up just automatically picking up a game of baseball. I actually have an article. Actually, it's from 1861. After camp, the camp dress style parade, which generally lasted about an hour. The camp was alive with fun and frolic. Leapfrog, double duck, foot and baseball, or sparring, wrestling, and racing are shared their attention. So as soon as they were in encampment, they would go out and just, if they had their free time, let's start playing some baseball. So you had these regiments having their team set up, their best nine, and then just as in normal time today, they would end up sitting in their free time, setting up tournaments, playing against other regiments, playing against even within their own in corps, and then eventually you'd go on to some larger box scores and larger tournaments within the Army of the Potomac itself.
And this isn't just an in-camp thing, right, Louis? This is the entire war. They're finding ways to improve camp morale because they're surrounded by, of course, the battles, which are terrifying enough, but disease in camp. And like you said, it's being encouraged from command to keep them active, keep the morale up, keep them busy, healthy competition.
Yeah. And you asked early on about the spread in the Civil War. Let me go back 1 year before the Civil War. 1860, up until that point, was the biggest year for organized baseball. They had the most teams. And they didn't play today. Baseball teams play 162 game season. Back then, these teams would go to other places and play a 3-game set. But then it might be a month and a half before they do it again with another team. So they're not playing that much. But there was a ton of teams in 1860. So when the war does break out, there's the most players that have played every baseball, organized ball, the year prior. So yeah, they are, when they get downtime, they're playing. Later on, I got some accounts that we can share where even Union soldiers in Confederate prison camps, this is early in the war, because later in the war, the Confederates aren't feeding the Union soldiers, so they don't have the strength, and they need to preserve whatever strength they have to participate in any type of game. But early in the war, they're playing baseball in POW camps, and then Southerners are doing the same thing when they come up north and they see the game and stuff like that. So, but yeah, it is. If you've got the time, nothing's happening, the weather's decent, and you're not on active campaign, they play just like they still do that today. If your places
and much like that article I started our episode with, I have numerous references of three different newspapers reporting about the same regiment. So I know you guys have a lot of primary source material with you. Is this common? Are newspapers across the country, or is it really isolated with those New York, New Jersey, Massachusetts regiments?
Go ahead, Jeff.
So it does go throughout the country, actually, north and south. They would send back their box scores. So box scores were invented by Henry Chadwick, a Englishman, actually. And he was the reason, if all the while you kept score, your box score, he's the one that invented on how to track baseball games. So the soldiers would send these accounts home because, again, this is your hometown boys. And even though we are far away from home, I would imagine, just like anything, it gives you a resemblance of home, and you could still have your pride of your town saying, look, our 9 are still fielding, we are still playing, and we're still excelling at the sport. Actually, I've got all the way down, I've got a thing here just to prove it's on both sides. In 1861, Confederate troops played town ball as well as the more modern versions of the game in their army camps. In November 1861, the Mercury in Charleston, South Carolina, reported that heavy rains created miserable wet conditions so that even the baseball players can't find a green sward in front of the camp. It's too boggy for their accustomed sport. So it is spread. Like I said, even back then in the 19th century, they had a lot of clubs, the versions of the game. So it was well played. Louis, on your end, do you have anything of reports or things that are put into newspapers?
I've got
great examples.
I've got quite a few. I won't read them all, I'm sure. This is from the history of Barycki, 1st Rhode Island Artillery. And this is in 1861, December 18th, 1861. It's sort of somebody was writing a diary and they included it in the history. Many of the boys had a revival of them school days in a game of ball. The amusements had much to do in preventing us from being homesick and were productive also of health and happiness. So it goes back to those earlier points. I have 3 years in the Army, the story of the 13th Massachusetts, July 1861 to August 1864. This is in May of 1862. The passion for decorating camp broke out again. Streets were ornamented with bows and trees, making an effective picture. In the afternoons, after battalion drill, the game of baseball daily occupied attention of the boys. On one of these occasions, General Hartstuff, riding by, got off his horse and requested permission to catch behind the bat, informing us that there was nothing he enjoyed so much. He gave it up after a few minutes and rode away, having made a very pleasant impression, without it in the least sacrificing his dignity or suggesting the lessening of his discipline, the cords of which we already noticed were tightening. It was pretty certain he was testing us one way or another. So
I love the stories like that where like the generals are just hopping down and being boys.
I was going to say that there's that interesting dynamic there, isn't it? Because they're in command and here's, we see them as not the ones that have it easier, but they separate themselves from the soldiers for the most part. And it's just interesting to see an example of him feeling that human, that just wanting to go out and compete with the boys and have that moment.
And, we mentioned that the economic class, most folks playing organized ball come from. So particularly when you have the draft, those folks can afford to pay for a substitute.
Yeah.
And they do it on several occasions. So they're still back home because they haven't been drafted. They paid for a substitute. Mm-hmm. They're back home playing organized ball, and they're part of this National Association, which is the precursor for the National League. And they are changing the rules. One of the big debates, I think it's during the war, is whether to go from this, allowing this catching the ball on a bounce and recording an out, rather than it takes more skill to catch it on the fly.
It was
The problem is you don't have a glove. But
1863. 1863 is when the association decided to change the rule to where you had to catch the ball on the fly. There was a big publications. Man, if you want to Google it, if you
I don't have time.
Yeah.
He's busy making funny faces over there to me. So he's really on the ball.
No, I'm really paying attention.
on the ball. So
there you go.
You had to catch the ball
That's a host.
on the fly, except in foul territory. So it wasn't until the later part of the decade that you had to catch it on the fly, no matter where it was. But 63 to let's say 68, if you were to catch the ball out of in foul territory on one hop, the striker was dead. So it was one of those things that even at that change of the rule, you'd still see people go chasing after a foul ball. I got 2 chances to try and catch this.
I'm wondering if 1863 isn't like an accidental year for these changes. And my thought process is you have a game, like you said, it's a gentleman's game. Select people play. Now, it's as big as it ever was in 1860, but they're not with each other every day. They're not playing 5 days a week. When these soldiers go out into the army, the upper and middle class are probably teaching those that have never seen the game, what's that? And it's spreading in the army. And now they're having to choose which set of rules they're going to play. There has to be a lot of conflict with that of these rules are different from these rules, these are these. And I'm wondering if maybe that interest in the armies, the spread of the game, might have disseminated back home that drove on that need for specific rule changes, or if that was just completely separate.
I think it's separate. And what baseball is doing is competing with cricket on a professional level. Cricket was played by a certain set of rules. And Henry Chadwick's one of the guys driving this. And he's a big proponent of having to catch it on the fly because that shows more skill than having it bounce. But again, he's not the guy out there with no glove. He's the old guy coming up with the scorebook. But he was also a proponent of the underhand pitching rather than over-the-top pitching that we have today. So, some of his things caught hold and some didn't.
So
I think it's trying to professionalize the game, and that was occurring more back home.
And one thing, I know we're talking about the Civil War, and you're talking about how you think those rules changed outside of the Civil War. So the North obviously has the luxury of not needing all of its manpower.
Yeah.
So they're still playing those games. Are the clubs still matching up against each other amidst the whole war going on down south?
Oh yeah, there's and I've got some instances of box scores printed in New York newspapers where they're still playing games. Might not be as many games, and they don't have as many organized teams once the war breaks out compared to 1860, the high water mark before the war. But yeah, they're certainly playing games. And like Jeff said, they're adapting the rules and becoming more professional. That's not to say that soldiers and regiments can't be changing the rules. When I was a kid, if you didn't have 9 players, you adapted to what you had. So we would play where we only used half the field. And if you hit it to the off field, depending which side of the plate you're on, you were out. You had to hit it to where the people were, because we didn't have enough people for the other field. So they're adapting rules within camps to fit their needs. I don't think those rules, though, translate later on back to the National Association. The association is doing its own thing with its professional teams while the war's going on.
And with the spread of the game in the Civil War encampments, one of the reasons why the New York game excelled and became the model of the way they're going to play, it's the easier form to learn. The game of rounders, the Massachusetts game, it is a more, I want to use the word violent, because I'm just thinking I've played a game where you can throw a batter out and throw a base runner out, and it is skillful and hurts if you get soaked. So
does the old Massachusetts game also not have the necessary running first, second, third base?
They do. They do.
Shorter.
Yeah.
Okay.
It's not 90 feet.
Maybe it's rounders I'm thinking of, where you don't necessarily have to go in that order, where you can go the other way as well.
Yeah. And there's also some of the versions of it where you have to stay, like if you're at first base, you're playing first base, you can't shade over towards second and play kind of like a shortstop. You have to stay within so many feet of the bag. So it was just a harder game for them to pick up. So I guess you could say the New York version of it was softer. So that would be the way why that version of the game kind of took off and is easier to teach.
and we were talking about they're still playing outside. They still have league play outside of the war, back home and in camp. And I know going back to that article I read, Jeff, you found that tournament that they had. So they're not just playing regiment against regiment; they're organizing tournaments. In the Army.
So there's a plethora of articles that I've been able to find that in that April prior to them going to Chancellorsville, they're in Virginia. It seemed to be a baseball fever broke out in one article that it seemed to be that there was the Corps seemed to have a baseball tournament and all the way down to there's a championship match that is referred to as the Army the Potomac championship match, but realistically, when you look into it, it probably is more just the regiments had intramural games, and these were the two best nines, not necessarily like the Second Corps and the Fifth Corps team. There were regimental teams that they played each other in the tournament. But I've got one from 19th Massachusetts. John B. Adams from the 19th Massachusetts, while in camp in Falmouth, Virginia, baseball fever broke out. It was the old-fashioned game where a man running the bases must be hit by the ball and to be cleared out. So they were playing a Massachusetts game. It started with the men, and then the officers began to play. And finally, the 19th challenged the 7th Michigan to play for a $60 a side. So not only were these guys playing this for the fun of it, this was a way for them to, yes.
$60 isn't chump change.
No.
That's interesting. I know, again, after that article, I'm wondering, do we have any accounts of how they're choosing team members? Do these regiments know who their best players are? They're playing enough amongst themselves, they kind of know who they're putting up against other regiments. And then what happens? So, for instance, that 8th New Jersey article, 7 of those 9 guys are killed or wounded at Gettysburg. But they're still playing again in October and November. So, there must be enough guys in those regiments, even a small regiment like the 8th of only 100, we would have had around 90 men left. They're still able to fill that and compete.
Yeah, because so on your teams back home before the war, the organized teams, there was 3 sets of 9. You had your best 9, those are the ones you put on your field. You had your next tier, second stringers, and then you had your muffins, and they're the least desirable on the field. And sometimes, that guy over there.
Yeah, like Matt. Muffin Matt is what they called him back home.
So they had...
It actually was my nickname in gym class for years, and now I understand why.
You got picked last or not at all?
No, they called me Muffin.
Oh.
That was my nickname. Oh. Now I get it.
Well, so they had... more than just the 9 on the team. And then they had these junior leagues, so younger, under 20 are playing. And, these young guys are probably the guys going in the Army. So you have, I'm sure, within the regiments, more than just 9 people to pick for your team, and the other team just has 9. You've got extra men that can pick up the game.
And just I've not read a lot of diaries, but as I started to go down this before the show, I can't tell you how few. Now, it seemed baseball is pretty prevalent in a lot of these camps, but I've read about it so few times in diaries. So I don't know if that's very regimental specific, but that, for instance, the tournament you talked about, I never heard of until you brought it here today. Mm-hmm. But that would have been, I'm sure all the soldiers would have gone out and watched that because it's regimental pride at that point, or corps pride.
Correct. Yeah. I mean, you've got something to keep your mind occupied. You're playing for pride. You're playing for money. You're playing for the love of exercise, and I think it's just one of those natured things. If remember, these are young adults that very much testosterone has taken over, especially being in combat. And how do you harness that? How do you harness that energy and keep their minds occupied? It's through competitive sports.
All right, now, before we go to the second half of the show, which is the more Ask a Guide, we have questions from the audience. I think Matt might open it up to the chat or phone calls.
Phone calls, yes.
What other tidbits do you guys have that you'd love to share with us?
Let me run through a couple of them. This comes from Under 5 Commanders, or A Boy's Experience with the Army of the Potomac by Jacob Cole. He was with the 57th New York Volunteers. He wrote, and this is during the Peninsula Campaign, So 1862. Leaving for a moment the scene of battle, we turned to Sumner's Corps just before the battle above mentioned commenced. Some of the members of the 57th New York had challenged the members of the 69th New York to a game of baseball. While the game was in progress, I was lying on the ground looking at the game when I heard a rumbling noise, and I said to Andy Wilson that there was fighting going on somewhere near us. When we stood up, it could not be heard, but when we put our ears to the ground, the sound could be heard very plain. Andy says, "I guess you are mistaken, Jake." I again put my ear to the ground and said, "Andy, our boys are fighting." Hardly had I spoke before orders came to report to our regiment at once. So the ball game came to a sudden stop, never to be resumed. So that's a case of battle interrupting a game. Here's a couple articles I got from Philadelphia newspapers. In Philadelphia, baseball started spreading before the war down to Philadelphia as well. This is from the Philadelphia Inquirer, January 14th, 1863. A great baseball match between the crack players of the 47th New York and the 48th New York took place at Fort Pulaski last week. It was witnessed by a large number of spectators. The 48th Regiment Club won the game. This is from June 30th, 1863, the Philadelphia Inquirer. What's going to happen the next day?
Surprise us. Tell us.
No, I'm going to save that for another day. It says, to baseball players and others, we are called upon to play a more serious game. Captain D.H. Moore is recruiting a company for state defense. A few more active young men wanted. Apply at once to the Armory, Broad, and Ray Streets. So there's a problem going on in your state, and they need help. Real quick, I always bring more stuff than I'm going to use. I do want to show this other newspaper article. This is from June. Let me skip that one. That's just a box score.
I was going to say, that looks pretty cool. That looked like a legit modern-day box score.
They are. Here's another one. But this is from Friday, September 25th, 1863, New York Times. And it's talking about a baseball game between the Atlantic Club and the Mutual Club, and it has their box score. And this was all one column. I made it bigger to put on this page. The little article beneath the box score is about horse racing, Union course trotting. It talks about this horse race. Right beneath that, there's a small article, and it says the last regiment relieved. The 69th Regiment, which has been the last on duty in the city, is relieved, the following being the official order. Headquarters, 69th Regiment, Essex Market Armory, September 23rd, 1863. In conformity with orders received from Division and Brigade Headquarters, the 69th Regiment is relieved from further notice by order of James Bagley, Colonel Commanding. So you have this, what caught my eye was, because I always look around these articles when I get them from papers, you had these two sports events, this baseball game with the box score, then you had this horse racing thing.
Then a little small thing is the bit about the war.
The 69th New York is being relieved from the city. They're part of the Irish Brigade.
Yeah.
They're being relieved and getting sent somewhere else. So it's just all put in there together. It's funny.
And we had talked about the soldiers needing that escape from the war in camp. You have to assume that people reading the newspaper, they want to read about the baseball team because everything they read about is battle. Yeah. They don't want to see their loved ones' names, but they do want to see them if they're on the baseball team.
Yeah. Right.
Now, Jeff, I knew you have an example as well about the center fielder and the ball. Do you have that?
I do, and I'll sum it up. Essentially, there's an account of while on in Louisiana, the club the regiment was playing a game. They were playing baseball, and a skirmish happened out in the outfield, and where the Confederates came up, and there was a small skirmish, and it was reported that not only did they lose their center fielder, but they lost the ball, and they were more upset about losing the ball than losing the center fielder for the team. Because, again, another one of the rules that I forgot to mention is if you lose your ball, you cannot play anymore. There is one ball per game. So they were more
that's the end of the game.
That was the end of the game. I've got two other little tidbits I wanted to bring up. This one I just thought was interesting. So this is from John Adams, the 19th Massachusetts again. He recalled in early 1863, when the regiment was stationed opposite of Fredericksburg, Union soldiers watched the Confederates playing ball games across the river. We sat on the bank and watched their games, and distance was so short that we could understand every movement and we would applaud good plays. And then just getting back to, these are clubs. These are your brothers. If you're back home and you're playing, you're playing serious ball, almost at a professional level. Professional baseball didn't come into effect until later the 19th century when the Cincinnati Red Stockings started paying their players. But prior to that, one of the most famous ball clubs was the Excelsior Baseball Club in Brooklyn. And I've got an account that it's a baseball player turned rebel. The Excelsior Baseball Club of Brooklyn recently expelled one of their members, A.T. Purcell, for deserting the flag of the Union and going over to the rebels. He was the physician and doing good business. During the past winter, he left and no one knew where he had gone. Sometime since he was heard from in Richmond, Virginia, as a brigade surgeon on the rebel General Morgan's staff. He had recognized he was in charge of some Union prisoners, taking them along the streets of Richmond when he was recognized by a gentleman from Brooklyn, formerly a member of the Excelsior Club. He entered into conversation. He was asked about his friends Leggett, Flannery, Creighton, and Bernard, whom were also members of the club. The facts came to knowledge of the club, and they expelled him by unanimous vote. So being able to go, if you were to go to war, if you were go, this was serious business. You were, my brother. Why would you pull? Why would you turn brother against brother? Why would you pull up arms against us? So that was just and it was interesting. The date on that article, it appeared in the New York Clipper on July 4th, 1863.
Wow. So that's right in the middle of that war. It's amazing. War affects everything, sport back home and everything like that. All right. So what we're going to do now is, Lois.
Can I do three more quick things?
You can.
Indulge me if you want.
I will give you permission.
I know
he might
people
not,
don't
but
want
I'll
to
let
hear
you
me read,
do
but I found these interesting. So
whatever
this
you want to do.
History of Battery A, 1st Rhode Island Artillery. And this is in 1864. On January 29th, General Hancock returned and resumed command of the Corps. We had plenty of ball games and other sports besides camp duty. On the 8th, February 8th, it was warm and clear. We had drill every day, also ball games and the other sports. General Hancock relinquished command to General Warren because of his injuries here at Gettysburg. On the 19th, it came out fair. General Hayes and his wife came into camp and watched us play a little ball and the game that we called Scratch a Little. On the 25th, we had a fine game of ball in honor of General Hayes, who sent to Washington for balls and bats to enable us to play to good advantage. When the general and his wife came galloping into camp with a number of officers and ladies, our captain went out to greet them and said, General, I suppose you would like to see the battery on drill. The general quickly replied, no, I want to see them play ball, which they can do better than any man I ever saw. So that's that. And then this is sort of the seriousness of a thing still going on. We're talking about them playing this game and everything, and that is a good distractor, but life is going on in the background while they're doing this. This is Personal Recollections, Civil War Diary of Major Lemuel Abbott. He's with the 10th Vermont Regiment. Let's see. Friday, January 29th, 1864. It's been really uncomfortable all day. It's been so warm. They had global warming back then, too. Lieutenant G.E. Davis started for Vermont this forenoon. Have completed the ordnance return, but it's not mailed yet. Most of the officers have been playing ball this afternoon. The non-commissioned officers have given us a challenge to play for the Oysters tomorrow, and the colonel has accepted. January 30th, cloudy, chilly day, but not much rain. One game of ball came in the afternoon, which was the commissioned officers won. 2 more games are to be played Monday if a good day. It's a cloudy, dark, gloomy evening in camp. Then March 19th, Saturday, 1864. The weather was truly fine this morning and sunrise, but noon the wind blew a gale. Captain Samuel Dara's Company D, of which I am second lieutenant, challenged the regiment to play a game of ball for $50, or rather Captain Samuel Dara did, which it accepted but lost the game. The regiment goes on picket tomorrow, but I don't expect to go. It looks like rain. So we're March 19th, 1864. And things are about to change as far as the war. The war that kicks up in May down in the wilderness is a different war than the preceding 2 years. Friday, April 29th, 1864. It's been warm and pleasant, nothing going on in camp. Men seem to be enjoying themselves playing ball. Monday, June 6th. Things have already started for the next campaign. Samuel Dara was shot through the head this afternoon by a sharpshooter while sitting with his company and died at 2 o'clock. That's that captain that wanted to challenge that other company. And then real quick, we have the 11th New Jersey Volunteers. March 1st, 1863. About this time, considerable amusement was afforded by the game of baseball played between nines led by Captains Martin and Logan, with Lieutenant J.C. Baldwin as umpire. Below is the box score. And I don't know if you can see that, but there's the box score. That's in the history of this, the regiment. That's in the regimental history. They put the box score in there. And I've highlighted a couple players. The two captains, Martin and Logan. Then we have a Lieutenant Ackerman and an Adjutant J. Schoonover. July 2nd, 1863, Gettysburg. And you're going to recognize some other names in here. Returning to the left, an order was received from General Carr to change front by bringing our left to the rear to meet General Barksdale's charge. During the execution of this moment, Captains Logan and Martin were wounded and both killed before reaching a place of safety. A moment later, Captain Ackerman, the next senior, fell dead by his side. During the early part of the engagement, Adjutant Schoonover was struck in the breast by a piece of shell but not seriously injured. Being again struck with a buckshot, he was forced to go temporarily to the rear. This is them trying to repulse Barksdale's charge on July 2nd here at Gettysburg. So these two captains and this adjutant both get killed here at Gettysburg to play that game. So I just want to include that because we've talked about they're having fun in camp when they can. It's a distraction, good for their health and all that. But once they get back to it, like you said, 7 of 9 from that one group of 9 ball players ends up being killed in the wheat field or around there. There's still a serious business going on in the background, and life comes back into the fray with a big rush at them at some points. So,
and I think that was honestly the perfect way to finish up this half of the show, because much like when I researched those guys' names, and I was so excited to see all these instances of baseball, but when I read about the guys and found out what happened to them, it's sad. And what we do here on the show and what Matt always talks about is war, and it's a drag because it's sad, and we're looking for little escapes. And this baseball topic is just such a wonderful escape, something new, something different, and it must have been exactly that for them. But you're right in the fact that you're reading names about guys challenging in baseball, and then months later they're killed. Yeah,
it's the whole war is sad to me, and the older I get, it gets sad, and I cry more and more on the field, and I hate it. But that's why I enjoy this podcast and you, the friends I've met, because I get to make jokes and it's lighthearted. But it comes back, to me, it's an amazing thing that box score is in their regimental history, and it's got those names of those men who died here at Gettysburg. For whatever reason, that stuck with me. Out of all the things I saw getting ready for this, that one thing stuck with me. They died here.
It probably meant that sport meant a lot to them.
I'm sure it
did.
And
it was very necessary, much like when they came here decades later and put monuments. It was a very necessary thing for them to move on and to get through things, just like that sport was probably very necessary to go through every day. And not just the battle. I mean, how many more men die of disease? And there's nothing you can do about that. Yeah. You're either going to get sick or you're not.
Yeah.
And there's nothing you can do to change that.
Yeah. I'm sorry, if I may. Lewis, you know how the old militia system, you've got these militias that go way back, and the Civil War comes, they're brought into the Army. And like, for example, the 69th New York, I believe, was one of the militias that is continues to the, so with baseball pre-existing the Civil War, but in the Civil War generation, baseball like solidifying as an important part of their war experience and their lives, and it becomes, as Mike's pointing out, like an escape for them, and therefore it's probably a little more important to them than it would be to any other generation during peacetime. I mean, obviously you're going to have your fanatics, but like, does all these teams, these clubs, that predate, let's say 1870, much like the militia system, do they become the seeds of teams that we now know as Major League Baseball teams?
I think in some cases, like Jeff mentioned, Cincinnati is the first, and I think that's 1876, right? That's when the National League comes on board, and it is 1876. That's why it's the senior circuit. But I would assume, some of these players that play during the war for regiments, if they're good enough, and if they're that good, they probably played in organized clubs before the war.
Right.
So
the clubs
carry on, and then they're the ancestors of some of the modern teams.
So the organized clubs predate the war. Is that right?
Yeah,
okay,
right. Yeah,
I missed that part.
Yeah.
Okay. So they predate the war, but so are they? I think 6 questions points out here. The remnants. Let's see. The athletics. They were the Philadelphia Athletic Club or the Philadelphia.
They're around back then.
Now they're just the Athletics.
Before the war,
right.
They're out of Philadelphia.
In the 1870s through 1890s, there's so many changes to leagues and clubs. I think you'd be challenged to find a direct lineage from something before the war that still exists today.
Well, I would. I'm not saying direct lineage. I'm just saying the seed.
I would say absolutely.
Absolutely.
Yeah. Okay.
And then, it's interesting. We have these soldiers playing baseball, and now there's a history of that. More modern. You look at World War II. Joe DiMaggio goes over. Yogi Berra goes over.
The great
Ted Williams goes over twice. He fights in World War II as a fighter pilot and goes back in Korea. And so you have this tradition of ball players actually going that are playing Major League Baseball, entering World War II, Korea, and football has it too with Rocky Bleier in Vietnam. But major sports figures participating in the nation's conflicts and then coming back home and trying to resume their careers.
And much like the Civil War, even though there's a terrible war going on, those clubs maintain playing. Some of their players leave.
They do, and specifically World War II, Major League Baseball made it a point to do that for morale. Bob Feller from the Cleveland Indians went over, but they carried on. They continued to have World Series. Now, was it the quality you had before the war? Maybe not, because some of your stars have gone. But they made it a point because it was a morale thing for the home front. If the home front loses its support, for whatever conflict, the conflict's done. You've lost.
Yeah.
You just lost from behind rather than out front. So they continue on purposefully for the morale. I think in the Civil War, it's not necessarily for morale. Again, you have upper class people that can pay a substitute to go fight, and you're already a member of a ball club, and you continue doing that. So one thing I want to point out, Jeff, in one of his readings, talked about them betting on baseball. During the war, this becomes an issue with the games being played back home, and Henry Chadwick's leading the charge against gambling in baseball. It's going to ruin our honorable sport. Just ask Pete Rose.
I was just going to say.
So, that issue, they're betting, and I had the account where the one captain wants to bet $50. Back home, gambling is becoming a problem, and they don't want to taint the game because it is a gentleman's game when it starts off. Everybody's getting along. You don't fight with the umpire, and afterwards, the home team pays for this banquet, and it becomes expensive. But gambling's starting to seep in. You're getting a more rowdy element at your games, and they want women to come to the games to civilize it, and they're not going to want to come if there's brawls and stuff. So they're betting on these games in camp, and I'm sure that's good-natured stuff. It keeps it competitive. But on the outside, the more formalized games back home, gambling's becoming a problem, and Henry Chadwick's leading the charge against that.
That's fascinating, especially, in camp, soldiers are spending, it's a universal problem. They're spending their money. They're gambling.
If they're not betting on ball games, what are they doing? They're playing cards.
Absolutely.
Every payday. They're going to play cards at the first of the month or last of the month, whenever they get paid.
Speaking of rolling the dice, we're going to take a break and let Matt come back and reclaim his throne. He's been back there long enough, banished to the Isle of Producer, and he will be able to answer or get some of your questions, and our guests will answer some of those Ask a Guy questions that were submitted by patrons before. And that will be here right after the break.
If you hate commercials, there's only one way to get rid of them. We're just 450 patrons away from your reward. Join us at patreon.com/Addressing Gettysburg. We'll be right back.
History Pioneers Foundation, we are about grassroots history on digital platforms. That means we are about podcasters, documentarians, YouTubers, and even TikTokers. All of these creators are out there trying to share their love of history with the public. They don't need ideas, they need funding, both from viewers and corporate donors. DH Pioneers' initial funding focus is on the Civil War era, with a special emphasis on the Addressing Gettysburg podcast. So be a vital part of the unique content Addressing Gettysburg has in store by donating at dhpioneers.com and help bring your love of history to the people. Digital History Pioneers is an IRS Section 501c3 approved charitable corporation that makes any donation tax deductible to the fullest extent of the law.
The Gettysburg Museum of History, located right here in the center of Gettysburg, PA. Owner and curator Eric Dorr grew up here and has spent his life collecting and preserving history through artifacts ranging from the Civil War, the Battle of Gettysburg, World War II, presidential items, pop culture, and more. His museum is free and open to visitors Wednesday through Sunday, 11 to 5 p.m., where you can stop by and immerse yourself in some of the most amazing artifacts that you would never believe exist in the middle of Gettysburg. If you're a fan of Band of Brothers and Everything Easy Company, you'll love his exhibit featuring the Dick Winters collection and artifacts from D-Day. You can even own your own piece of history by buying one of the many relics they have for sale in the museum and on the website gettysburgmuseumofhistory.com. The Gettysburg Museum of History is a non-profit 501c3 organization with a foundation that allows all purchases and donations to keep the museum operating and open free of charge. They have been featured on the History Channel, the Travel Channel, the Smithsonian Channel, and the Science Channel. Now you can check them out on American Artifact, the series on the YouTube channel, The History Underground. So that's the Gettysburg Museum of History at 219 Baltimore Street or the gettysburgmuseumofhistory.com.
If you like this podcast and what we're doing here, please like, share, and subscribe. Thank you very much.
That's another great question.
Who can forget the sounds of the 60s?
The 1860s. I can't, and you can't either. Now, there's Marching Through Georgia, the exciting new album by Billy Webster. All of your favorite hits of the 1860s in one place. Such hits as Gary Owens, The Battle Hymn of the Republic, All Quiet Along the Potomac Tonight, Marching Through Georgia, and much, much more. So what are you waiting for? Go to billysongs.com and order your digital download of Billy Webster's Marching Through Georgia today. That's billysongs.com. Seminary Ridge Museum and Education Center, Gettysburg's premier museum, is housed in the historic Lutheran Seminary building constructed in 1832, a witness to the first day of battle. The museum's 3 floors of exhibits connect visitors to the dilemmas that led to the Civil War, provide a powerful and personal view of the battle's first day, and explore one of the battlefield's largest hospitals. No visit to Seminary Ridge Museum and Education Center is complete without a guided tour of the building's famous cupola, where on the eve of battle, officers and civilians saw thousands of Confederate soldiers' campfires burning to the west, and Brigadier General John Buford watched for vital federal reinforcements as fighting erupted on the morning of July 1st. Today, you can stand where Buford stood and discover how this view helped chart the course of the Battle of Gettysburg. Your trip to Gettysburg is not complete without a serious visit to Seminary Ridge Museum and Education Center, Gettysburg's premier museum. Purchase tickets online at seminaryridgemuseum.org or call 717-339-1300. To get tickets or a cupola tour, listeners may call or walk in and mention Addressing Gettysburg, or by ordering online using the promo code AG1863 for 20% off. Seminary Ridge Museum and Education Center. It began here.
There's a devil to pay.
Ladies and gentlemen, there is something called Little Ground Top out there in the ether, and it is possibly one of the greatest things you'll ever have in your life. It's coffee, is what it is. Coffee made right here in Gettysburg. That means it's historic coffee beans, even though they're from Honduras and Guatemala. Still, the fact that they were made here in Gettysburg makes them historic. So you can drink a cup of history every morning, crisp, fresh, delicious, piping hot, iced, however you would like to do it. You can even, Lewis, I got Cindy an espresso maker for our anniversary, and she used Little Ground Top in it. I went into Bantam, I bought a bag, and I said, hey, can you grind this so that it can be used fine grinding in an espresso maker? And they said,
no problem?
No problem.
Man.
That's what they said.
That's
no
great.
problem. Jeff, you get Little Ground Top, don't you?
I do. It is flying off the shelves. I tried getting a bag before I got here today, and they were out.
They're out. In fact, I just met with them the other day, and since January, we have sold hundreds of bags. In the store, they sell out just about every week, and that is, what did I say that was? How many pounds is that, Mike? 780 pounds a week.
85.
No. They make 12 bags a week, and they usually sell out within 2 days.
Really?
Yeah, and so that's 12 pounds a week in store, and about another 6 to 10-ish online a week, which is insane to me. I mean, because it's good. It's not insane for that reason. I think it's insane that anybody would buy anything that has anything to do with me that much.
They've sold out every week since they've been
in store. They have sold out every week except for, I think there's like 2 really dead weeks in the winter.
Yeah.
And nobody sells out of anything in that time.
People don't come out of their houses.
But on the average, they sell out every week.
Very
so
good,
anyway,
very
it's
good.
Little
Must
Ground
be
Top.
good.
It is good. Jeff gets it all the time, right?
Fantastic.
How many bags a month do you get?
Just one. I was hoping to pick up 2 today. I ran out this morning.
Are they
on my way
out?
here. Yeah, they did not have any. So it's a good thing I could order online, and now I'll have to get the subscription.
That's right. You'll have to subscribe. Then that way you don't have to worry about it.
What does the subscription do?
Well, when you go online, you can subscribe to have it monthly, or so if you buy,
Automatic.
you get 1 month, automatic. You get 1 month or 1 bag a month, right?
Yeah.
So you get 1 bag a month. If you get 2, whatever your order is, you could just have it, and then they'll charge it and ship it to you, and that way you don't have to worry about it. Because
you'll never forget.
Tell me something, Jeff. Isn't it true? There's nothing worse than when you run out of your Little Ground Top.
Nothing worse.
Nothing worse, because you start to, it's like when you run out of cigarettes when you're a smoker, you start nicking out, and you start caffeineing out. And then you have to go get that second-rate Folgers or Maxwell House or Cafe Bustelo.
Not really good to the last drop.
It's not even good at the first drop, okay?
Yeah.
So Bantam Roasters at 82 Steinway Avenue, right across from the Dobbin House, and of course, addressinggettysburg.com/cafe.
You're listening to Addressing Gettysburg.
Super chats of $10 or more rise above the din in the comments section. Now that that's out of the way, let's ask a Gettysburg guide. Here's Matt and the gang.
Okay, we are back. Let's have a big round of applause for Mikey B. I think he did a fantastic job.
Outstanding job.
Really good, Mike. And let me tell you something, Mikey. If you do that well again, I'll freaking kill you. Okay?
Sorry, Dad.
It's a good substitute teacher we had.
Really was. Very poised. Like how he sat there in the chair like this, straight backed, and
he was organized.
Good posture. Way more organized than I ever am.
Very
right,
good
Lewis?
transitions.
Even when I have a foundational knowledge of something, I'm never that organized.
Because you're an overall charge. So you've got a billion things
Right.
into your mind. Mike just had a couple hundred.
He had one job to do. How
Yeah.
hard is that?
And he
to
did
do?
it great.
He did
He
it
did great.
fantastically.
Yeah,
I don't
he's
mean, I
not
don't mean
in
to put
charge
you
of the
down.
shop.
No, he's fantastic. He did a really good job. I was actually quite proud of him. And I have to say, I'm going to be a little easier on the people that run the cameras because there were a few times where I was late at a transition or I went to the wrong person or whatever. So it's not as easy as Mikey makes it look. Mikey does a very good job. Mike and Cindy do the best job out there because they are nervous about pissing me off. And that's the way to go.
I don't think you understand what we're nervous about.
Fear.
We're nervous about having to listen to you complain.
Well, whatever.
Donate now
It
to-
works. Whatever it is.
Donate now to DH Pioneers for a full-time producer for that.
Amen to that. Amen to that. Thank you very much.
Or
for
just
that.
buy one of those Get Off My Lawn shirts you're wearing
Or you could do that, but
for $50.
But I think it would be better if we just had a donation for a full-time producer. I think that's great. That's great. All right. Now I lost the questions that I had written. No. I have but I wrote down. Oh, here it is. Okay. So let's see. Nope. I already asked you that question. I was going to save it for later, but here we go. Okay. So Jeff, welcome, by the way, to Addressing Gettysburg. Thank you for asking this. I thought this was very interesting, to be honest with you.
It's fun.
And I didn't interject too much because I was just like amazed at this whole other level of Civil War culture, the Army culture. And I knew they played baseball, but that they took it this seriously, I think is really interesting. And like Mike pointed out, they're writing down who's doing what in the game and how well everybody's doing. And then there's a battle and those guys are gone.
Yeah.
And that's the sad part. And so imagine now you come back to this pastime, this thing that is a relief and escape for you, but the guys that were there at the last game, not all of them are there. So that's got to be tough. It's kind of a bittersweet escape there.
Yep.
So let's get to some of the questions now. First, I'm going to start with a question which was a super chat by Debbie Jones. She says, I'm still at work, but here's my question. When the soldiers talk about games, do they mention particular players as being really good, or is it a game discussion mostly? I'm sorry, is it a discussion mostly about the teams? So do they point out the individuals who are particularly good, or is it more about teams and how the team
during the
performs?
war?
During the war.
What do you think, Jeff?
The information I've come across, it's really they're talking about the team. They're giving you the box score. Lewis found some great examples of an actual box score, so you can see who the best players were. But for the most part, the most articles that come across, the report back home is just simply the boys, the team. The team did well, that we fielded well today.
It's the camaraderie.
And Six Questions does have one here. He says, did class distinctions play a part in how games were organized in camp? Did officers play with the enlisted men?
Well, I had that one thing where the officers are challenging the non-commissioned officers.
Which, again, that really fascinates me, especially generals. Picturing a general come riding by and he sees a game going on. He hops off his horse and he's like, hey, let me play.
General Hayes with his wife.
Yeah. Yeah.
So,
all right.
but they're human like everybody else.
I guess so.
And if you hear the outfielder and that ball's coming and General Hayes hit it, are you catching it?
right. Exactly. Okay. So we have a patron here who last time we did a show, I could not pronounce his name because it's spelled in Gaelic. And it looks like Coilen O'Coglig. But he finally put the pronunciation in here, and it's actually pronounced Jolene O'Quigley. So I'll always be fascinated with Gaelic. And I'm Irish, and I don't get it at all. But here we go. He says, greetings from the Emerald Isle, home of Irish Rounders, the forerunner to American baseball. When the Irish in the 19th century took up baseball, they were already familiar with a similar game called Rounders. There are references to this game in Ireland going back to the 13th century. That's how we say that in New Jersey. That's also the 13th century. Irish names are plentiful in the early annals of baseball. Just saying. A few questions for Lewis. One, I have Baseball in Blue and Gray by George B. Kirsch. Are there any other books on the topic that you would recommend? That's question number 1.
Well, you have this book, so you already know that one. And here's the other one I got.
Baseball's First Inning, A History of the National Pastime Through the Civil War by William Rysick.
And it is more, and you can see I got this from a library at some point. It is more comprehensive than Baseball in the Blue and Gray. And there are other publications. Like I said, I mentioned in the beginning, I don't know if I mentioned it or off air, but when I was a member of Society of American Baseball Research, I got 2 publications, I think it was every quarter, the Baseball Journal and National Pastime. And they are historical, like Gettysburg Magazine is for Gettysburg, have historical references to baseball. National Pastime really goes back further, if I remember correctly. So you would find some articles about early baseball then. But these are the 2 books that I have. I've got plenty of other books, but they deal with more modern 20th century baseball. And I'll let Jeff cover the other website.
So the other great reference, if you're looking for just more information about how baseball came about, the history of the game, protoball.com is a great resource. That's where a lot of some of the gentlemen that came up with information for sabermetrics, they have been putting together a lot of compiling a lot of history about the Civil War and baseball and articles and things. But another book that I like is Baseball in the Garden of Eden by Major League Baseball's historian John Thorne.
Interesting. Adam and Eve were even playing it. And his second question is... His second question is, are there any books that deal with the Irish participation in baseball and connections to Rounders that you're aware of? No. Do you hear any, have you come across any stories about the Irish or Rounders in, not necessarily stories, but mentions of them in any of the sources you've found?
Not the Irish by name, but I mean, the Massachusetts game, the Rounders was played in Massachusetts, and I mean, that might as well be carve that state out and ship it back to the Emerald Isle, but I mean...
Yeah.
The only thing I can think of when it comes to the Irish Brigade specifically is that I know they were really into horse racing. Yeah. And they would have horse races in camp. And that was St. Patrick's Day. They'd have a big horse race thing set up.
And then his third question is, what did Doubleday do wrong at Gettysburg apart from not inventing baseball?
You should have come on our Get Out of the Car tour.
Well, he's in Ireland.
Oh, last year. And I would have told you that Doubleday actually does a pretty good job. And I think he was unfairly relieved from command based on some reports that come from a slightly or a very tired, maybe slightly anxious Brigadier General John Buford at 3:30 in the afternoon after a full day's work, and he claims nobody's in charge. Well, Doubleday was doing his part at that point. He was doing the best he could, and I think he does a pretty good job. But that's another subject.
And, you know, another one, Jolene, is Josh in the comment section says, Baseball Before We Knew It is a way better book.
Oh.
So.
I think I have that book. I couldn't find it because a lot of my books are packed up because of space, and I couldn't find that.
Read it.
These two.
I own it. Okay, Evan Clapsaddle says, do any current Major League Baseball teams have roots in Civil War baseball teams or veterans from the war? I'm sorry, I stole your thunder on that one before there.
You know, there was a team of Philadelphia Athletics, and so when Philadelphia has a professional team, MLB, they're the Philadelphia Athletics. Then they moved to Kansas City, and then they move out to Oakland. Now they're in Sacramento, and they're getting ready to go to Las Vegas whenever they get. So the Athletics is the one team. Whether they're really connected or they just share the name, I'm not sure about that. But that would be the closest. Jeff might know.
The Red Stockings, Cincinnati Red Stockings, will all go all the way back. But they weren't organized, to my knowledge, prior to
I think that's post-Civil War, yeah. And I think they're, like, 1876 is the year, Little Bighorn, where the National League comes into being. And that's always fascinated me. You had Custer out there at Little Bighorn while you got the National League being formed. And the National League's still around. So.
Matthew Gillespie says, I've always heard New York City regiments were responsible for spreading baseball throughout the rest of the country during the war. How true is this? Also, there's a painting of Union soldiers playing baseball while in a Confederate POW camp. How accurate is this painting, and would this have been common? It seems, given the lack of food, POWs would have had little energy for such activities.
They do, and I have accounts, we just didn't get to them, where they are playing baseball in Confederate POW camps. But this is earlier in the war, 1861, 1862, when the lack of food isn't quite the issue that it's going to become. So they do. I haven't seen a painting. I know there's a sketch, and it might be the same portrayal of a game. I think it's in Salisbury, North Carolina, POW camp, where Union POWs are playing. You might be familiar with it.
I think that's the one he's referring to, and it's pretty accurate.
Yeah. Somebody sketched it, but like they did back then, of them playing ball. Yeah.
Yeah, and just the POWs playing ball. I actually had an account again that I didn't get to as well about the Union soldiers were given permission to play ball. And the guards were not all tall the same. And so while one gentleman was running base, was shot dead.
And as far as the New York regiments, New York had the most organized popular teams before the war. So when those guys enlist for the war, they're going to be with New York regiments. So it stands to reason that New York is responsible for some of the spreading throughout the country. But it's also other places. You have Massachusetts soldiers, New Jersey soldiers, other northern soldiers doing it too. But New York certainly was a big part of that because of the organized ball they had up there prior to the war breaking out.
Hey, Matt, if you check your email, if you have it over there on your laptop, I emailed you the link to that picture that guy's talking about, that sketch.
Oh, did you, Michael? Did you?
That's a host and a producer.
That's a producer. That's what a producer does. Wait, it's too small though.
Yeah, that is it.
Yeah.
See if you can download it. All right. Or right click and.
All right. Well, go back to the cameras, and then
so we don't see this sloppy work.
So they don't.
How the sausage is made.
Let's see. We'll call that b-ball, which is also basketball. But we'll just do that there. And hold on. Let me go to my desktop, and I'll find basketball. I'm sorry, baseball, whatever. Where are we?
We could do a show about
basketball in the Civil War.
Joseph Sherfy created the first basketball rim from one of his peach baskets.
Is that true?
I just made it up on the spot.
That's pretty good, though. That was pretty good. You had me there.
There it is, Matt, on the right.
Where? Oh, here it is. Okay, let's see. Can I make this larger now? Here we go. There we go. Okay, go ahead. Go ahead.
Oh, that's
good, yeah. There it is. There it is. So there they are playing. Look at that.
Now, did the Massachusetts rules have the square set up where it's not the diamond like that? I can't remember if that.
Yeah, Massachusetts it was more like town ball.
Right. So that's probably the New York game that they're playing.
Yeah. Yeah.
So what do you mean? So instead of it being a diamond, it was a square?
Yep.
With another point outside of the square being home base.
Interesting. Huh.
Sounds complicated.
That's
does.
Why
it doesn't last.
Yeah. Okay, that's interesting.
Cricket's complicated to me too, so I don't understand that.
The parole days look pretty good there. If that's a prisoner of war camp, they got some dogs, a couple people lounging
early in the war.
Oh yeah,
early in the war.
Yeah, looks like camp.
Definitely not Andersonville.
No. All right. Let's see. Now let's go back to the questions here. Josh Buccioni. He says, I was wondering if Lewis was familiar with the book Baseball Before We Knew It, there you go, by David Block. It has the most in-depth history of the game to date and the best explanation of how Abner Doubleday, the Abner Doubleday myth got started and why it is still around. Another book that complements it well is Baseball in the Garden of Eden, by Major League Baseball historian John Thorne. These two books weren't usually on the radar of most Civil War historians, but they have great information. Two more sources with looking at baseball are Baseball Research Journal, like the Gettysburg Magazine, but for baseball. It's funny how like people months in advance, say a lot of the same stuff that we end up saying, and you haven't even looked at the questions. And also the website protoball.org, which tracks historical baseball references, including Disney entries of Civil War soldiers playing during the war.
So who's asking this?
That's Josh Buccioni. It's not. What was the question here?
There wasn't one. It's not you, Josh.
But
that's a lot
clearly,
of information you threw in there.
Yeah, that's good.
He knows his stuff.
Passionate about the game, so that's great.
He is.
Yeah.
Well, and he, I think just to make sure it was said, he said all the stuff in the comment section too, while you guys were talking earlier. And good thing I didn't. I was almost going to jump in with it, but I'm glad I didn't, because here it is. Because I didn't read these questions before either. Rich Snyder says, was baseball more popular among Union or Confederate troops? That's question 1.
My opinion on this, I think, would be just with the northern troops, just because of the populace. That's where the population was, right? It was more in those cities of New York, Boston. So I would think it'd be north. There's a lot more documented history that you can go back and actually see, but there are accounts that is just as used as a game in the Confederacy. So
they just don't have, prior to the war breaking out, the organized ball clubs like you up north. The one place that comes close, I think, is New Orleans. It sits on the coast, though. It's that harbor big area. It's a little bit different than the rest. So
his second question is, were POWs permitted to play baseball at prison camps? And obviously, yes. We have a photo of it right there. Yeah. There it is. And 3, does Lewis think our 2025 Baltimore Orioles team could win baseball games against Civil War era teams, tongue planted firmly in cheek?
At this point, no. No. You know what? Again, Rich has become a great friend, and we talk about the Orioles. Rich will recognize my hat. This is the 1966 Baltimore Bird. They won the World Series against the Dodgers that year. And like I said, I grew up an Orioles fan. I've been a fan for life, and it's been a tough few decades. They made the playoffs the last couple of years, but I commiserate. I hear from Rich probably weekly. We talk about the Orioles and other things, and he's just become a great friend, and I really appreciate his knowledge and insight on a variety of things, not just baseball. He's a smart fellow.
Rich is a great guy. He's very good to me as well.
I think that the 2025 Orioles could win some games against some the teams back in the Civil War era. I think there's enough athleticism now.
Whose rules are you playing by?
Exactly.
You take away their gloves. I mean, it's a different game.
I mean, they might have a chance against the Invalid Corps. the Veterans Reserve.
You know, there was a great essay written by A. Bartlett Giamatti. He was the commissioner. He wasn't the commissioner very long, that banned Pete Rose. He is also the father of actor Paul Giamatti. And he wrote this great essay in a book I have, how baseball is designed to break your heart, because it's a game of failure. The higher batting averages are .3 something. That means the majority of the time you fail at the plate. Mm-hmm. You fail. You fail as a pitcher. And there's just failure all throughout this game. Now, your team will win X amount of games, but, X amount of teams, there's only one team that's going to win. The rest of them have failed, and that's all sports. But the way the stats are set up, it's a game of failure, and it's designed to break your heart in the fall. And when you suffer through winter, and then spring comes, and hope springs eternal, and you build up that hope again. We're going to do it this year. This year feels different. And I think in baseball, it does happen more than the other major sports. That a team, the Kansas City Royals a few years ago, came out of sort of nowhere. They didn't make the series, but they were good. And the Orioles were that way for the last couple of years. We've gone the opposite way this year. But at that certain point, that hope that sprung eternal, it dies like the dandelion on a hot summer day and had rain in a month, and you're back to failure again.
Yeah.
It's a beautiful essay, though.
But Louis, that cycle's so true. I mean, as a Phillies fan until 2008, I only knew pain. I was alive in '83 when they lost to the Orioles.
Yeah. Say that again?
1983, the Baltimore Orioles won the World Series.
Who caught the last out?
It doesn't make a difference.
Calvin Ripken. Anyway, my man Calvin.
It's something about the length of the season, the amount of games, the fact that it's played in the summertime. So the winter, when you're most down, you're sulking over the season. But when pitchers and catchers report in February, and you know it's going to get spring. Yeah,
it is.
It doesn't matter how crappy your team is. You're going to have some optimism until at least the first day.
I just love the game. I can live without the other sports. For a while, I never watched football. I watched it when I was young in the 70s again. And then during the 90s, I just got old to me. Now I watch it again when it's on. But I read box scores in baseball. I don't do that for the other sports. I don't care. But I'm always looking at box scores. I might not watch all the games, but I'm looking at box scores to see how players do. I'm looking to see how many times the Orioles strike out, actually.
One of my favorite things about baseball is it is the only sport of the major ones where the offense does not have the ball.
Yeah. And it's the only sport where each stadium is unique. The diamond portion is the same, but when you get to the outfield, it's all different. He's got a Red Sox hat on. That's one of the unique. He's got the pesky pole, which is short right field. And then you got the big green monster. I've sat on top of that monster before once they put
Remember that from my Boy Scout trip in Boston? We saw the big green monster.
Yeah, you've got Camden Yards now. White Sox have sort of a modern thing. They're unique ballparks. Versus every football playing field, every basketball court, every hockey rink is the same dimensions. It's all the same.
Right.
Baseball is unique once you get to the outfield.
And you look at the rules, they don't state how far the outfield goes. That's one of the things. That's only the bases. And the only reason why fences became a thing was because owners of clubs could then charge admission to the games.
Because the crowds would just crowd in. And they also interfered with games when they get too...
As crowds often do with whatever. Well, listen, guys, I'll tell you something. You wouldn't be in such sadness if you didn't pay attention to sports. Life is sad enough. Why do you need to subject yourself to that? I don't get that. See, that's what I don't get. I don't get it, but good for you.
We're irrational people.
Apparently so.
I'm speaking for me, not Jeff.
But there's something about suffering with everyone else. You know, misery
misery loves company.
Right?
Okay.
Like I wear this Darren Dalton jersey, and everyone's like, 93 was a good year. Everything else sucked. I'm like, yep, I lived it.
Yeah.
It's awful.
Yeah, okay. Well, that's a discussion for another day.
It's like when we tell people we're associated with Addressing Gettysburg, and everyone's like, oh, that's rough. It's like, yeah, someone's got to do it.
You don't listen to another Sickles podcast? Well,
Sickles podcast. All right, listen, thank you very much, ladies and gentlemen. Jeff, thank you for coming and doing this. Thank you for suggesting this. This was good. Mike,
it was fun.
Great job, Mikey, up there at the top of the show.
Job.
Really great job. I'm very surprised and I'm very proud of you. I knew you could do it. I told you that, and you finally did it. And so, thank you for doing that.
It took you 5 years to wear me down.
To wear you down, exactly. I've been begging you for 5 years to be part of the show. All right, that is it, ladies and gentlemen. You have yourselves a good day. I hope you enjoyed this rare, odd, hopefully we'll do it more often type of an episode with Mikey guest hosting once in a while, or at least co-hosting with me. I hope you enjoyed it, and we will talk to you next time. And we will knock the next show out of the park.
Our hearts so stout have got us famed, for soon 'tis known from whence we came. Wherever we go, they dread the name of Gary Owen in glory. Instead of spa, we'll drink down ale and pay the reckoning on the nail. No man for debt shall go to jail from Gary Owen in glory. Instead of spa, we'll drink down ale and pay the reckoning on the nail. No man for debt shall go to jail from Gary Owen in glory.
Thanks for watching. And if you enjoyed this video, we have a lot more content for you over at patreon.com/Addressing Gettysburg. Also, you can make a tax-deductible donation to help support more videos like this at dhpioneers.com. Great job, Mikey.
I didn't even cry. I didn't.
That's great.
You know what?
That's awesome.
I'm not leaving. I'm not leaving.
I think you did a good job.
I'm not leaving.
It's like you practiced.
That's the first time you ever done this?
Yeah.
You want to start a podcast?
It's like Coke Zero.
I'll be honest with you. It's easier than you think, right? He's told, it's hard. It requires. I went to podcast school for like 3 years. You're number one in my book too, buddy. All right, Matt.
You did good, man.
Yeah, that was very good, Michael.